The boy who would not give up the night was quiet in San Francisco, but inside a small house, a young boy lay awake staring at the ceiling. His name was Clinton Eastwood, Jr., but everyone simply called him Clint. He was tall for his age, with sharp eyes that carried both curiosity and worry. His family was struggling. His father worked odd jobs that never lasted long, and his mother tried to hold the family together with love and patience. But the truth was simple. Money was scarce, stability was a dream, and every few months the Eastwoods had to move again, chasing work, chasing survival. This instability left scars on Clint. He never knew if he would be in the same school next year, or even next month. Sometimes, as he walked to class, kids laughed at him for wearing clothes that were too old, too loose, or simply not fashionable. He would lower his eyes, say nothing, and keep walking. Inside, though, he promised himself that one day he would not be the boy others looked down on. One day he would stand tall, and they would remember his name. But dreams were far away when reality kept knocking at the door. Clint was not a strong student. In fact, he struggled to keep up. Teachers often told him he was slow or that he lacked focus. Some even suggested he might not amount to much. These words burned in his young heart, yet instead of crushing him, they planted a seed of defiance. He whispered to himself at night, "I will show them. I will prove them wrong." The suspense of his life deepened when he turned into his teenage years. Clint was tall, so tall that people often stared at him. His height made him look different, but it also made him awkward. He was shy, unsure of himself, and uncomfortable with the attention. He avoided speaking up in groups, fearing laughter or rejection. But behind this silence there was a storm building, an energy waiting for the right moment to break free. His family kept moving from city to city, each place just a temporary stop. This wandering life gave Clint a strange gift. He learned to observe. When you are always the outsider, you watch more than you speak. He studied people, the way they walked, the way they spoke, their expressions when they were sad or angry. Without knowing it, he was training himself for a future he could not yet imagine. Then came the war. World War II was raging, and like many young men of his time, Clint was drafted into the army. Suddenly, the boy who once doubted himself was placed in situations where mistakes could cost lives. He became a swimming instructor in the army, teaching soldiers survival skills in the water. It was not a glamorous role, and then fate struck. One day, Clint was a passenger on a Navy plane. Mid-flight, the engine failed. The aircraft went down into the cold waters off the coast of California. Panic swept through the men, but Clint remained calm. He swam miles through freezing currents, guiding another man with him, refusing to let fear take over. Hours later, exhausted and shivering, they reached safety. That night, lying on the ground, staring at the dark sky, Clint realized something. Life was fragile, but courage could carry a man farther than fear. He had faced death and survived. In that moment, the insecure boy began to fade, and a stronger, braver man began to take his place. After the war, Clint returned home, unsure of what to do. He tried different jobs, working as a logger, digging pools, even stacking shelves. But nothing felt right. He wanted more, even if he could not name it. Sometimes, when he passed movie theaters, he would stop and stare at the posters. Faces of actors looked down at him, larger than life. Something stirred inside. But could he, a shy boy from a struggling family, ever dream of such a life? The thought seemed impossible. And yet, life has a way of testing those who dare to dream. One day, through a chance meeting, Clint was introduced to someone connected with Hollywood. His tall frame, rugged face, and piercing eyes caught attention. He was encouraged to try acting classes. At first, Clint laughed at the idea. He was too shy, too awkward. His voice was flat, his smile uncertain. People told him his acting was stiff, even wooden. But Clint remembered his childhood promise, "I will prove them wrong." He worked hard. He stayed late in classes, repeating lines again and again until they felt natural. He studied other actors, not to copy them, but to learn the secrets of confidence and presence. He was still far from polished, but there was something inside him, an intensity, a quiet strength, that audiences could not ignore once they saw it. Still, the road was not easy. Years passed with only small roles. Clint worked in restaurants and gas stations to survive. Sometimes he wondered if he was wasting his time, if he should give up and find a safer path. But whenever doubt came, he remembered the cold ocean, the night he swam for his life. If he had given up then, he would not be here. So why give up now? Then came the call that changed everything. A television series needed a new face, someone fresh, someone who looked tough but carried depth inside. Clint was chosen. At first, he did not believe it. When he stood in front of the camera, heart pounding, he felt the same fear he had as a child walking into a new school. But when the director shouted action, something shifted. His silence, once seen as weakness, now gave him mystery. His eyes, once filled with shyness, now burned with quiet fire. The audience felt it. They wanted more. Overnight, Clint Eastwood became a rising star, but the real story was not just about fame, it was about transformation. The boy who once doubted himself had found his voice. The young man who had been told he was slow and unremarkable had proven that resilience could build greatness. And yet, this was only the beginning, because the world would soon discover not just an actor, but a man whose journey carried lessons of respect, humility, family, and kindness. The journey of Clint Eastwood had just begun. The rise of a quiet strength, the cameras rolled, and the lights burned hot. Clint stood there, tall and silent, waiting for the director's command. This was not just another day on set, it was the moment he had been waiting for all his life. The boy who once felt invisible was now in front of the world. Still inside him, the doubts whispered, "What if I fail? What if I am not enough?" The television show was called Rawhide. It was a Western series about cowboys, cattle drives, and the untamed land of America. Clint was cast as Rowdy Yates, a young cowboy with fire in his spirit. At first, the role was small. But something about Clint, his rugged face, his steady eyes, his quiet strength, captured the attention of viewers. They saw in him something raw and real. But behind the scenes, Clint was restless. He knew he was not the most skilled actor on the set. Others spoke more smoothly, moved more naturally. Critics often mocked him, calling him stiff, wooden, even talentless. Clint did not argue. He listened, absorbed, and worked harder. He believed in learning through patience, not anger. Every evening after filming, while others celebrated, Clint went home to study. He practiced lines in front of a mirror, searching for truth in every word. He read books about human behavior, about emotions and silence. He discovered that sometimes the greatest power was not in shouting, but in saying less. Silence, he realized, could be louder than any words. His family remained his anchor. Clint never forgot the struggles of his parents, their sacrifices, and the values they taught him. Respect for others, kindness in small acts, and humility even in moments of pride. His mother, Ruth, often reminded him, "Clint, remember, fame is nothing if you lose your heart." These words stayed with him, guiding him as he walked deeper into Hollywood's glittering world. Then, as Rawhide gained popularity, another opportunity knocked, an opportunity that would forever change his destiny. In the 1960s, Italian director Sergio Leone was preparing to shoot a Western unlike any before. It was not an American production, but a European one, filmed in Spain, styled in Italy. Hollywood actors laughed at the idea. They said no one would watch an Italian Western. But Clint saw something different. The script spoke to him. The story was raw, violent, and filled with silence and suspense. The main character was a mysterious man with no name, a drifter, a loner, a man of few words but endless strength. Clint accepted the role. When he arrived in Spain, the set was dusty and rough, far from the polished studios of Hollywood. But Clint felt alive. He brought with him not flashy speeches, but a quiet presence. He wore a poncho, smoked a cigar, and narrowed his eyes with the sharpness of steel. He spoke only when necessary, letting his silence carry the weight of mystery. When A Fistful of Dollars was released, critics were divided. Some mocked it, but audiences were mesmerized. They had never seen a Western like this, and they had never seen a man like Clint Eastwood. The tall, silent drifter became an icon overnight. People began calling him the man with no name. Suddenly, Clint was not just a television actor, he was a star. But fame came with shadows. As his face appeared on posters, Clint struggled inside. He had achieved success, but he feared losing himself. Hollywood was a place of temptations, money, pride, and arrogance. Many actors before him had risen fast, only to fall into ruin. Clint refused to follow that path. He remembered his promise as a boy, "I will prove them wrong, but I will not lose myself." His humility became his shield. He treated everyone on set with respect, from the cameramen to the makeup artists. He never demanded special treatment. Once, when asked about his sudden stardom, he simply said, "I got lucky. I was at the right place at the right time." People admired his modesty. Then came For a Few Dollars More and the good, the bad, and the ugly. Each film built upon the last, turning Clint into a global legend. His silent strength, his squinting eyes, his controlled anger, these became symbols of a new kind of hero. A hero who did not shout but stood tall. A hero who fought not just with guns but with presence. Yet even as the world applauded, Clint felt a deeper calling. He did not want to be just an actor. He wanted to create stories, to direct films that carried meaning. He wanted to show that cinema was not only about entertainment, but about truth, struggle, and the human spirit. This dream came with resistance. Producers laughed at him. They said, "Clint, you are an actor, not a director. Stay in your lane." But Clint remembered the voices of his past, the teachers who said he was slow, the critics who said he was wooden. He had proven them wrong once. He would prove them wrong again. In the early 1970s, Clint took a leap. He directed his first film, Play Misty for Me. It was a psychological thriller about obsession and fear. No one believed it would succeed. But when it premiered, audiences were stunned. Critics who once mocked him now praised his eye for storytelling. For Clint, this was not just success. It was transformation. He had stepped from being a face on the screen to a mind behind the camera. He had found his voice not in speaking, but in creating. But behind the career, there were personal struggles too. Fame demanded long hours, endless travel, and constant pressure. Clint's relationships suffered. He faced heartbreak, loneliness, and the weight of choices that tested his values. Yet through it all, he held on to the lessons of his youth: respect, resilience, kindness, and humility. He often said, "What you put into life is what you get back." For Clint, that meant giving effort, patience, and sincerity, even when the world offered doubt. His transformation was not sudden. It was a slow climb, built through years of hardship, rejection, and quiet determination. He had become not just an actor, but a storyteller, a creator, a man who carried both silence and strength. And still, the journey was far from over. Greater challenges awaited. Greater doubts would return. And the man once called the drifter would face choices that tested not just his career, but his very heart. The burden of fame and the test of the heart, the applause was loud, the lights brighter than ever, and Clint Eastwood's face appeared on screens across the world. But behind the curtain, away from the cheering crowds, Clint sometimes sat in silence, asking himself a question that many successful men ask. Is this all there is? The 1970s had made him a star. His Man with No Name films had changed Western cinema forever, and now Hollywood was calling him not just to act, but to lead. His movies were earning millions, his name was powerful, and yet fame was a strange companion. It gave him glory, but it also gave him weight, a heavy burden he could not always share. People expected Clint to always be strong, always be the quiet hero. But Clint was human. He had doubts, he had fears, and his personal life was often shaken by loneliness. Success had built walls around him. Everywhere he went, strangers looked at him with admiration, but very few understood the man behind the squinting eyes. He turned more and more toward directing, hoping that storytelling would give him peace. In 1971, Play Misty for Me had shown his ability to create tension and emotion. But Clint wanted more. He wanted to show not just the coldness of violence, but the warmth of human struggle, the resilience, the kindness, the silent courage people carry every day. Then came Dirty Harry. This film gave him another role that defined an era. Inspector Harry Callahan, a tough cop who faced criminals with a gun in one hand and justice in his eyes. Audiences loved it. They cheered for the man who stood against corruption, against evil with no fear. But not everyone admired it. Critics accused Clint of promoting violence, of being too cold, too harsh. The controversy was loud. Clint could have argued, could have shouted back at those who criticized him. But he chose silence. Instead of defending himself with words, he decided to let his work speak. He believed that a man's character is not proven in arguments but in actions. Still, the pressure grew. Each success raised expectations. Each failure threatened his reputation. Clint knew that Hollywood was unforgiving. One mistake, one weak film, and the same people who praised him would turn their backs. And then, a deeper test came, not from Hollywood but from life itself. Clint's relationships began to show cracks. The long hours, the endless filming, the constant travel left little time for family. He faced heartbreaks, separations, and moments of regret. He loved his children deeply, but he knew that sometimes his career kept him away from them. Late at night, he would sit alone, wondering if the price of fame was too high. One night after a long day of filming, Clint returned home exhausted. He found one of his children waiting for him, holding a drawing. The child smiled and said, "Dad, I made this for you." Clint looked at the picture. It was of a cowboy standing tall under the sun. His child had drawn him not as a movie star, but as a hero. Clint's eyes filled with tears. In that moment, he realized something. No matter how many films he made, his greatest role was not in front of the camera. It was as a father, as a man who could give love, respect, and guidance. This moment became a turning point. Clint decided that his films would no longer just entertain, they would carry meaning. He wanted his work to reflect values of kindness, respect, and resilience. He wanted to show not only strength, but also vulnerability. In the years that followed, he chose roles and projects that revealed both sides of humanity, the power and the pain. He directed films that showed flawed heroes, ordinary people facing extraordinary struggles, and stories that reminded audiences of family, sacrifice, and humility. Yet, the struggle inside him did not vanish. Fame continued to test him. Hollywood demanded that he remain the same tough hero, but Clint wanted to grow. He wanted to show the world that strength was not just about fists and guns, but also about patience, forgiveness, and quiet endurance. The suspense of his career deepened when he took risks that others warned against. He directed films that were slower, quieter, more thoughtful. Some said he was finished. Some said audiences would never accept this new Clint Eastwood. But Clint, as always, did not argue. He worked, he created, he trusted his vision. And once again, he proved them wrong. Through the late 1970s and into the 1980s, his work began to show a new kind of depth. While the world still saw him as a symbol of toughness, those who watched closely began to see something more. A man who had endured struggles, carried regrets, and yet never lost his humility. His kindness often appeared in small, quiet moments. On set, he treated crew members with respect, no matter their position. He remembered names, asked about families, and listened. Once a young assistant dropped equipment and expected anger. Instead, Clint bent down, helped pick it up, and said, "Don't worry, kid. Mistakes are how we learn." This simple act left a deep impression, because true greatness, Clint believed, was never about making others feel small. His humility also shaped his leadership as a director. Instead of shouting orders, he directed with calm. He gave actors freedom, trusted their instincts, and spoke only when necessary. Many actors later said that working with Clint was unlike working with anyone else, because he created an environment of respect where creativity could breathe. And still, Clint's greatest lessons were not on the screen, but in life itself. He learned that resilience was not about never falling, but about rising every time you fall. He learned that family, though sometimes strained, was the true measure of a man's heart. And he learned that kindness, even in small acts, carried more weight than fame ever could. By the time the 1980s arrived, Clint Eastwood was no longer just an actor or even just a director. He was becoming a legend, a man whose journey from insecurity to strength, from silence to storytelling, inspired millions. But the journey was not over. In fact, the greatest transformation of his life was still waiting. Because soon, Clint would create films that not only entertained, but also touched the very soul of humanity. The weight of legacy and the courage to change the desert wind was quiet, carrying only the sound of boots pressing against the dry earth. On screen, a lone figure walked slowly, shoulders heavy, eyes sharp but weary. This was Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven. But behind the camera, the man himself was facing questions that reached far beyond one film. By the 1990s, Clint was already a legend. He had built decades of success, acted in iconic roles, and directed films that proved his skill. Many in Hollywood thought his career was complete, but Clint was not finished. Inside him, there was still a restless voice asking, "What more can I say? What more can I give?" The suspense of his life at this stage was not about survival, it was about meaning. He had achieved fame, wealth, and respect. But he knew that true legacy is not measured by how high you rise, but by what you leave behind for others. With Unforgiven, Clint decided to take a risk that could have ended everything. It was a Western, but not the kind the world expected. Instead of celebrating violence, it questioned it. Instead of showing heroes without flaws, it revealed broken men haunted by their choices. Hollywood doubted him. They said audiences wanted action, not reflection. They warned him not to make the film. But Clint, as always, trusted his own vision. He believed that silence, pain, and humanity could speak louder than bullets. When the film was released in 1992, it stunned the world. Critics who once mocked him now called Unforgiven a masterpiece. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Clint. In one moment, he had redefined not only his career but the entire Western genre. Yet for Clint, the real victory was not the awards. It was the chance to finally show the world the lessons he had carried all his life. That violence has consequences, that strength carries responsibility, and that even legends are human. As he held the Oscar in his hands, Clint thought not of glory but of the long journey. The shy boy who was told he was slow, the struggling actor who worked odd jobs, the man who swam miles through cold waters to survive. Every scar, every doubt, every quiet moment of resilience had led him here. But life was not done testing him. In the years that followed, Clint continued directing, but his focus shifted even more toward humanity. He told stories not just of guns and battles, but of fragile hearts, of family, of kindness and sacrifice. In 2004, he directed Million Dollar Baby, a story about a young woman with nothing, who dreamed of becoming a boxer, and the gruff old trainer who believed in her. The film was raw, emotional, and devastating. Audiences cried, critics praised, and once again, Clint won the Academy Award for Best Director and Best Picture. He was now not only a star but one of the greatest filmmakers in history. But what touched people most was not his trophies, but the way he told stories. Million Dollar Baby was not about boxing. It was about resilience, respect, and love, the very values that Clint had carried since childhood. Off-screen, Clint continued to live with humility. Even as awards filled his shelves, he stayed simple. He drove himself to work, ate ordinary meals, and treated everyone with kindness. Many young actors were surprised to find that the legendary Clint Eastwood was not distant, but approachable, even gentle. One story from a film set tells it all. During the filming of Mystic River, an actor froze during a difficult scene. Nerves had taken over. Instead of scolding him, Clint walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and quietly said, "Don't worry. Take your time. We're here when you're ready." The actor later said those words gave him the strength to deliver one of the best performances of his life. Clint believed in patience, in respect, in giving others room to grow. He often said that the best leaders are not those who shout, but those who listen. But even as he found peace in directing, Clint was haunted by the passing of time. He was growing older, and with age came reflection. He looked back at his life, the mistakes, the regrets, the victories, the lessons. He thought of his family, his children, the people he loved. He wondered how he would be remembered. There was suspense in his soul, a quiet fear. Not of death, but of being forgotten, of not leaving enough good behind. And so, even in his 70s and 80s, Clint continued to create. While others retired, he kept working, driven not by fame but by purpose. Films like Gran Torino and American Sniper carried deep questions about humanity, respect, war, and redemption. They reminded audiences that even in old age, a man could still teach, still inspire, still lead. Clint's transformation was complete. He was no longer the shy boy, no longer just the silent cowboy, no longer only the tough cop. He had become a storyteller of humanity, a teacher through cinema, a man whose humility and resilience touched millions. And yet, through it all, he never forgot where he came from. He often spoke of his parents, of the hardships that shaped him, of the lessons of respect and kindness that guided him. He believed that greatness was never about standing above others, but about lifting others up. His life was proof that even the most unlikely boy, awkward, doubted, rejected, could rise not just to fame, but to meaning. The legacy of silence and strength. The morning sun rose over Carmel, California, casting soft light across the ocean. Clint Eastwood, now in his 90s, often walked along the shore in silence. His steps were slower, his hair silver, his face marked by years. But his eyes, the same sharp, steady eyes that once squinted under cowboy hats, still carried fire. Yet inside him there was a quiet suspense, the kind that lingers when a man looks back at his life. What have I given to the world? What will remain when I am gone? These were not questions of fear, but of legacy. Through decades, Clint had lived many lives. He was once the shy boy who feared rejection. Then the tall, awkward young man mocked for being wooden. Then the man with no name, a symbol of mystery. Then the tough cop in Dirty Harry, the director who shocked the world with Unforgiven, the storyteller of Million Dollar Baby and Gran Torino. Each role, each chapter, shaped not just cinema, but the hearts of those who watched. But as Clint aged, he knew that awards and fame fade. What lasts are the values you pass on: respect, resilience, humility, kindness. And in this, Clint found his true purpose. He began speaking more openly about what mattered. He told young actors that success was not about being loud, but about being true. He reminded them that silence could be powerful, that kindness was never weakness, and that failure was only another step towards strength. On one set, a nervous young filmmaker approached him, afraid of making mistakes. Clint smiled and said, "Kid, don't worry, I've made plenty of mistakes. The key is to learn not to stop." Those words stayed with the young man forever. Clint's humility touched even strangers. People who met him often expected arrogance, but instead they found warmth. He listened more than he spoke. He respected waiters, drivers, assistants, the same way he respected stars and directors. Because for Clint, every human being carried dignity. The suspense of his later years was not in his career, but in time itself. He knew every day was a gift. Instead of slowing down, he kept creating. Even in his 80s and 90s, he directed films. Some wondered why he did not retire. Clint's answer was simple: because I love telling stories, and his stories were not just about characters. They were about humanity. About the soldier who carried the weight of war, the old man seeking redemption, the young fighter chasing dreams. Through them, Clint gave voice to values that mattered most. Resilience in the face of struggle, respect in the face of conflict, love in the face of despair. But his greatest story was not on screen. It was his life itself. He had risen from nothing, faced rejection, survived near death, and carried the weight of fame. Yet through it all, he never lost his humility. He never forgot his parents' lessons. He never stopped believing in kindness. One evening, sitting with his family, Clint looked at his children and grandchildren. Laughter filled the room. For a moment, he was not the legend, not the star, not the director. He was simply a father, a grandfather, a man surrounded by love. And he realized this was the true reward, not the trophies, not the fame, but the chance to give love, to inspire others to live with dignity. As the years moved on, the world began to look at Clint Eastwood not just as a celebrity, but as a symbol. A symbol of resilience, of transformation, of a man who proved that silence can be stronger than words, and humility greater than pride. And so, his story leaves behind a question for all of us. If a boy once told he was slow and unremarkable could rise to greatness through respect, kindness, and resilience, what might we do if we believe in ourselves the same way? Because Clint Eastwood's life was not only about cinema. It was about humanity. It was about reminding the world that no matter the struggles, no matter the doubts, we can endure, we can grow, and we can inspire.